Well, hello everybody. This is Stephen Miller, Charity Channel. I'm your host for this upcoming Charity University 90-minute GPA webinar. And I just want to welcome you all aboard on this. Well, of course, I'm in California. I don't know what the weather's like anywhere else, but it's a beautiful Friday where I am anyway. And today's session is called Riding the Wave of Consulting, and it is presented by Linda Gatton Butler. So I'll be introducing her in just a moment. Some of you may already be familiar with Linda if you've taken any of her other sessions or been to a GPA conference where she presents or so on. But just in case, just very briefly, Linda has a master's in social work with an emphasis on planning and administration from Ohio State. She's a member of the Academy of Certified Social Workers, founder and past president of Miami Valley, Ohio chapter of GPA and national GPA board member. And she's a licensed independent social worker supervisor. She is a senior fundraising consultant and president of Butler Consulting. Has been doing that for over 17 years and specializes in grant seeking, capacity building, fundraising, training, and managing services. And I'm just sort of the tip of the iceberg, but her full bio is on the classroom page. I know you probably have already seen that, or you wouldn't have signed up for the class today, so I won't belabor that. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda. And Linda, if you could kind of start off by letting everybody know how you like to take questions and discussion and that kind of stuff, that would be really helpful.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I am open to questions. Actually, I have a breaking point at some of these slides. It seems like there are about three different components or three phases of what I've done as far as pulling this together. So I'm going to break about 3 or 4 times for questions. And since we're so small, I'm open to, and I respond much better to people actually talking to me instead of being in this room all by myself with my cats and dogs. So it's much better to get interaction going. And I think as far as this kind of a presentation, you may have some specific questions as individuals as to where you are in the consulting world. And I'm going to stop after a couple slides before we get into the checklist for success, and there are some natural stopping points. So I'll stop about 4 times, and we'll go from there. So I'll actually start with the first slide here, and our learning objectives, as you saw on the website. One of the first ones is just tools and tips and techniques as far as getting started to help you achieve successful and smooth sailing. All these waves and sailing and all that kind of stuff, I actually presented this 90-minute session at the St. Pete National Conference. And we were pretty packed in there and had some beginning consultants and some folks that have been doing this for a long time. So a lot of different kind of questions, and I had a tendency to have folks share their stories. So if you have particular stories or suggestions or ideas that are different than what I have to offer you, I'm wanting to hear those, and I update my trainings based on you helping me, and I do thank you ahead of time for what I'm going to learn from you today, because we're sort of all in this together. The presentation that I did was pretty well attended. I did some work with Cheryl Kester, who also is a consultant in Arkansas as far as doing consulting, and so I thank those people for their input into this kind of training also. Just a little background as to how I got into consulting, because a lot of people, when they are considering consulting, they're asking me questions like, should I keep my real job? And it's like, yeah, I think you should, especially if you're going to set this up on the side as part-time. I actually had my last real job was the executive director here in Clark and Champaign County in Ohio, and it was sort of my swan song. The agency was actually dying and when I took over about actually 25 years ago. and we basically were able, and I say we, it's a team effort. We're able to turn the agency around. It's a counseling agency, family counseling. And after 8 years, my swan song was that we were able to do a capital campaign. We bought a shopping center, and that shopping center still exists, and we put all kinds of fundraising in place. I had no formal fundraising background. I was really good at selling Girl Scout cookies, and so kind of, I think, sales helped. And the effort to turn the place around resulted in a very successful capital campaign where a donor was able to give 100 stocks of McDonald's, as in Golden Arches, and I had some good mentors and teachers. So after we were able to successfully turn the agency around, I think that the message to me was I need to be teaching other folks and mentoring other folks as to how to do fundraising. And fundraising, of course, includes grants and individuals and all kinds of other different ways to fundraise. So the consulting for me started about 17 years ago when I left that agency and started my own home-based business. So that's my background. I've been doing it since 1994. And these are kind of the tips or the issues that I struggled with to begin my business, which is home-based. And I literally did look at my vision and a plan. I actually did put this in writing, which most people say they're going to do, but they sometimes don't do. I wanted to look at my mission and my purpose, and very intentionally, I started this out as a one-person shop 17 years ago. I continue to be the only employee, and that was very planned, very intentional. I don't want to get into the business of having a lot of employees that I'm responsible for. Instead, I work with 1099 folks or associates, and I don't want to really have to supervise them closely. So the folks I work with, I have a pool of about 20 or 15 people, and quite frankly, they're all over the country, and they have different expertise. So that mission and purpose for Butler Consulting included actually wanting to be home for dinner with my husband. And so I don't travel a lot, and those are issues you need to look at. I very intentionally, we set up our business plan and our mission to target only and primarily the Miami Valley of Ohio, which is basically between Columbus, which is our capital, and Cincinnati. And that's like a 90-minute market. So within 90 minutes, I can pretty much see all my clients. Otherwise, I use the Internet, all the electronic good stuff that's out there. But I was very intentional about looking at that mission and purpose as focusing primarily on that area of Ohio. I wasn't very creative about the name of the business, Butler Consulting. Duh. I mean, I kept it simple. I wanted basically my name out there. A lot of people spend time on their name for their business, and that's really a call that you need to make. I don't think that's as important as the marketing you do or how you explain the services that you want to provide. From an IRS standpoint, I looked at, I really just started out with my Social Security number. Very quickly, though, I did register with the Attorney General to get a federal tax ID number and became an S-Corp. My preference at this point in time would have been to be a limited liability corporation, which I think most consultants are at this time. And the difference between the two basically are tax issues. I did work with a local person as far as my CPA that helped me through setting up my taxes for the company only through my incorporated business, and that became a good tax break for me, which is separate from, of course, my individual or joint taxes. I looked at things like capital, location, office space, and I chose to start home-based, which, of course, saved a lot of money. I very intentionally have a bedroom of my house as only my office space, and I write that percentage of my utilities and the space in my home Even have a house cleaner that comes in every once, twice a month, and I can write things like that off based on the percentage of my home that I use for my office. A lot of people can't use home-based services. They need to have an office to go to every day. You have to be incredibly disciplined to be able to not run outside and go garden or watch TV or do the laundry or fix dinner or whatever. When my husband comes home from work around 3 o'clock, he knows not to bother me. And I have this space and kind of certain hours that I work each day, and I am pretty disciplined about that. If you don't have that ability, you may want to look at finding an actual office space yourself versus being a home-based service. Another one of my tips is the accounting, payroll, and banking as far as how you handle that. I want to keep it very clean and be able to track what I do through my business from a tax basis, as well as the funds that come through Butler Consulting. So even though it's just me, and it continues to be just me as the one employee, I have a separate checking account, a separate credit card, and I actually run my payroll through Paychecks, which is a national organization. Very affordable, and that way I do not have to keep up with all of the tax changes for small businesses, and they have a great printout for me electronically every month. I'm able to pay my retirement through Paychecks, all my taxes through Paychecks, and it's a great way for me not to have to deal with those issues, and it's very affordable. So that may or may not work for you, but it certainly has worked for me. As far as registering as a fundraiser, I suggest that you look at your particular state and research with your Attorney General as to whether you need to do that as a grant professional. There are some folks that are very, very intentional about not calling themselves a fundraiser because of the strings attached with their particular state and all those rules with their Attorney General. In Ohio, what I have found is that calling grant-seeking fundraising is not an issue with a lot of strings attached. So I do see grant professional and grant-seeking work as fundraising. And that philosophy is actually a session I did at National one time, and it was really fascinating to see the differences among the states. So you may or may not see the work we do as fundraising. I certainly do, and that's part of the context in which I create and promote and market what I do. In fact, I actually do fundraising beyond grant seeking under my scope of services as a consultant, and we'll get into those scopes of service later on in this presentation. The last tip that I have to share with you is that I literally, as an individual, sat down and said, okay, what are the pluses and minuses of a full-time job versus consulting? And because at that point when I left Family Service Agency, I very definitely wanted to have my own business and sort of be in control, be my own boss, not have to go someplace else from 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever, wanted to do home-based. And I love the freedom that I have. That's the biggest plus of the consulting. I actually can, if I want to run out and do gardening, if I get all my work done sort of as an incentive, whatever it is that you love to do, consulting can work for you. And the full-time job sometimes doesn't allow you that. It does help when you look at things like benefits. Consulting can be tricky as far as health benefits, which are very crucial. I am very blessed that my husband is a state employee as far as being an educator, and so I was able to be on his health care plan, and those benefits were covered. Because I am a social worker, I also have the ability to get my disability and my liability and all those other kinds of insurance that I think is important to have as a consultant through my social work pool of folks at a very affordable rate. So the pluses and minuses for me, I was able to weigh the consulting and the freedom and the ability to run my business on my own as many more pluses than a full-time job. Okay, let's look at the next slide as far as the 3 R's of fundraising. This is something I use as a consultant, and it's kind of a Butler consulting thing. Feel free to use this yourself, but I found myself in the beginning having to simply be able to articulate what grant seeking is versus fundraising to those folks who didn't understand what it was. And so the 3 R's are something that I use in training. I do a lot of training and in explaining the work that you do, like when you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table and people say, so you're a grant person, what does that mean? And this is kind of a way that I explain the work that I do. The 3 R's I see of grant seeking, and even if you start with fundraising, it's all about relationships, and I know I'm probably singing to the choir here or preaching to the choir, and I think that grant seeking also is all about relationships. So I explain that the contacts and opportunities are all about relationships, being in the right place at the right time, being able to connect a grant funder and a grant seeker. That could be yourself as the consultant or your client. It's all about relationships and networking. So in my opinion, that's the most important R, building those relationships. And in most of the work that I do with my clients who are primarily nonprofits, that's the R that they skip over and don't see as the most important thing in grant seeking. And that's the big reason why they don't get the money with the grants they submit is they haven't built a relationship with the funder, be that a foundation, corporation, whatever, and they don't want to put the time or effort into that. So that first R I really emphasize when I'm teaching folks what grant seeking is all about. The second R, and in priority, I see as research. And this, again, is an R that a lot of my clients forget, skip over, don't do their homework. And, for example, here in Ohio, we have a lot of foundations and a lot of opportunities, especially in the bigger cities, to approach our funders in corporations or foundations, and therefore have the geography to be able to say, hey, in Ohio, we can go after A, B, and C funder. But if I'm in Ohio and am going after funder in California, it's a whole different ballgame. And the chances are that it's not necessarily a fit unless it's a national funder. So I try to teach folks to do their homework, to do the research, to go online, to look at the guidelines and see if there is an alignment of their mission and their project with the funder's criteria. So that's the second R. My third R, which is what most folks initially and sometimes singly focus on, is just the writing. And yeah, I can spell, and I usually get a chuckle out of that one, but the writing, in my opinion, is the least important piece of grant seeking. And that's about communication skills, being able to articulate verbally and of course, in writing, having those skills to be able to do a one-page LOI or to do a gazillion-page federal grant. Those are very important skills to have, but I think that the relationships and research are much more important than the writing are. And therefore, that process is a difference between being a journalism major and being very good at writing, or being maybe a social worker or someone who sees the bigger picture of the relationships and the research and the writing as a process. So I do emphasize that this grant-seeking thing that we're doing is called a process, and that I say it's a very targeted process, and use a target as my logo for my business, because I think that kind of in one word captures this wonderful thing we do called grant seeking. That includes planning, research, those personal contacts, the fundraising piece, and the follow-up. So feel free to use those 3 R's if that's helpful to you. Let's look at the next slide before we take some questions. A business plan. I do think putting in things in writing is important. And when I had some associates, after about, I think it was about 4 years until I hired associates. And we actually would take a day away, go to someone's lake house or beach house or someplace fun, and we, as a group, would create a business plan. And we would update that every year. That business plan would include a marketing plan. It would revisit the whole mission of who we are. You know, do we still want to only focus on the southwest quadrant of Ohio and not travel? And most of my associates agreed that's what they wanted to do. I think that it's important to look at your budget. What's your goal for the year? How many clients? You know, how much do you want to grow the business? How much do you want to increase the scope of service or the actual consulting services or outreach you want to do with folks? Do you want to put money into marketing besides what you can do on networking or you know, a website or the internet? And talk about the planning process as to your whether you want to just do proposals or whether you want to do more than proposals and grant seeking. One of the things that we did, and we found sort of a niche for ourselves because other consultants in our area that we were targeting as our target population, many consultants were not offering the service of helping clients become grant ready. And what we were finding with almost all of our clients, whether they were around for 100 years or whether they were just grassroots, you know, new agencies, were that they did not know how to become grant ready. They didn't even know what we were talking about. And so we very intentionally wanted to work with grassroots agencies that needed help with capacity building, with the infrastructure issues, with what they had to do to get their ducks in a row before they actually wrote that first proposal or actually did that first fundraising. So that's sort of a unique service that we offer, the capacity building, that very few consultants are offering, quite frankly, in Ohio or in our area. And so we've created some tools around that to help folks become grant ready and work very intentionally with nonprofits in looking at what issues we needed to offer or what services we needed to target in order to help their board, their staff, whatever, become grant ready or fundraising ready. So those are sort of some tips, tools, techniques to get us started. I'm going to stop right here and see if you have questions about what I just covered. Carol or Pam?
Yep.
I'm fine. On my end here, this is Pamela.
Okay, Pamela. Any questions that you might have?
No, I'm good. I'm good. You're great.
Okay. Are both of you actually consulting now or thinking about it, or where are you in the process?
Well, this is Pamela here. I have been on my own for about a year.
Okay.
I'm in West Central Ohio, in a very rural area, and and I was in Columbus, so I knew that area, and then I went out this area to be with my family, and it's been difficult getting clients here. So I'm revisiting. I took when I saw your webinar, it was like an opportunity to revisit again and see what I needed to do with firming up the foundation of this desire to have my own business. So I don't know if that's helpful. I don't want to take too much time talking about my situation.
No, that's great. As a matter of fact, let's connect after the webinar, and maybe there are some things that we could do together. That's another thing that I have offered since I've been doing this for so long. I often meet with those individuals that are just getting started, and I would mention a service through GPA. Hopefully you're both GPA members. If you're not, and I would be remiss if I didn't do my GPA marketing talk, being a GPA board member. GPA has actually a mentoring plan available that I think a lot of folks are not aware of that's free for a while. We set up some consulting, especially those of us who are consultants. We are offering a couple meetings or calls or whatever to help folks get started that are specific to your needs. So if you are a GPA member, that is available to you. And, after the webinar with both of you, that certainly is something we can talk about if you're interested. It's certainly one of the many, many benefits that GPA has to offer. So let's make sure we connect because GPA, the central chapter in Columbus, is a very strong chapter. And the Miami Valley chapter, we helped form both the Columbus and the Cincinnati chapter. So, and I've actually presented at both Columbus and Cincinnati chapters, and would try to reach out to folks when they're, as you say, struggling. It's tough getting started, and just having the opportunity to talk to someone who's been doing it for a while. And I do that myself. I think we always have room to learn. So thanks for sharing that, Pam.
Okay, and thank you for the invitation. I will follow up. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Carol, did you have anything I needed to go into in more depth or questions or comments? Carol?
She has her phone muted.
How does she
I'm sorry, I got it mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Technology is a wonderful thing.
I am really enjoying listening to you also. I actually, similar to you, I worked at a nonprofit. It was a preschool for developmental center for quite a few years, and then kind of went out on my own. Then got a job as the foundation and corporate relations officer for the National Outdoor Leadership School, and I'm in Wyoming, by the way. And then just felt that I really cared a lot more about local issues and the people in the state more than I did in international school, and it actually is a pretty wealthy school, so it didn't really need me. I didn't feel. Anyway, my problem is keeping myself disciplined, and also, and I don't know, maybe you see this or maybe not. There's so many nonprofits, and they're just seeking advice and help, but getting paid is a tough thing from them. I don't know if you experienced that, but so many of them are struggling themselves,
right.
And it's hard.
Very hard.
Do that. It's hard to say, no, I won't do it. Another thing that's kind of interesting, and it's great to hear you talking about it, is the libraries throughout the state are in the midst of a big challenge from the state government and to raise matching funds. And I am now I guess you'd call me the director of development for one of the counties here. And working with the board in that way is so different from being the grant writer, very frustrating. So I was delighted to hear that you've also done it on that way. And just learning how to deal with people, I think, is the toughest thing I have.
Okay.
But I am kind of lucky. I only take on projects that I really feel passionately about. For instance, anyway, it's a lot of kids, the arts, just social issues like you do. But I love hearing all your insight and experience.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks so much for doing this.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for letting me know a little bit more about your background, because that helps me tailor what I'm saying to perhaps meet your needs. And Carol, you were saying as far as struggling with nonprofits and getting paid and all that good stuff. That especially right now is a real issue. And one of the things that I mentioned is that helping folks get grant ready. And why don't we go on to the next slide, which is Checklist for Success. what I found is that I actually created this tool with input from lots of people and lots of training and working with nonprofits over the years, and so I change this all the time, but the basics are pretty much here. This is how I start working with all clients, and it was fascinating for me. I actually did my first national conference was in Boston, and my daughter was going to Boston U at that time. And it was kind of cool. I'm going, I am really brave because I'm this little home-based business that is presenting a consultant session with all these, big firms from Chicago and L.A., and I'm going, what? Who do I think I am? And this is one of the tools that I offered to them, and the reaction was just incredible because what happened was that the consultants in these big firms in the big cities, when I offered this tool, they said, how did you figure this out? And my response was, how else would you do it? Because this just came so naturally to me, more than likely because I'm a social worker. And with any individual or family or group or whatever, you start where the client is. And any client, in my opinion, you have to start with an organizational assessment, just like you do with counseling or therapy. And so any organizational assessment, no matter how old the agency is, has to have some pretty basic infrastructure in place. And a lot of people call this capacity building. So I just basically, this checklist, which you'll see on your slides, is basically two pieces, and I just have a one-page handout that I carry with me all the time. When I go into, a lunch meeting or dinner or whatever, it's all about food. I try to meet with a prospect. I can do this now in about an hour, sometimes hour and a half. These are the sort of bullet points that I highlight or interview the client or the prospect to see where they are with whether they have their 501c3 or how is their board doing or how is their volunteer base or do they have functioning committees on their board? Do they have all their ducks in a row with all these attachments that you need to have to do, especially state and federal grants? Are they registered with grants.gov? These kind of bullet things tell you a lot about an agency in a very short period of time. So in an interview, I try to get to the point of getting this kind of information on this checklist for success to be able to assess what that agency needs from me. And after an hour interview, they can tell me what their needs are, and I have sort of a standard proposal that I create from this checklist for success that includes my scope of services that's unique to that particular client that captures what we talked about in that first session. And then I send that proposal to them, and I give them the scope of work, which usually includes project development. And I'd be glad to share one of my contracts with you. It's not really rocket science, but it's pretty basic stuff about project development, whether they're grant ready or not, what I'm going to do as far as the grant seeking, whether they want me to do other fundraising, whether they want me to do training for their board or not, and put that in a proposal, offer them an hourly rate, a project fee, or a retainer, and give them those three choices, and give them some information about the Code of Ethics that not only is available through GPA, but also I'm a member of AFP, the fundraising group, that educates them and lets them know that, no, I do not work for a contingency. No, I will not work for a percentage. Some real basic stuff so that they know, even if they don't choose to work with me, that's what professional grant seekers, that's the way they work. I try to steer folks, once I use this checklist checklist for success and reflect that in the proposal, I try to steer folks toward a retainer, because I think it was Pamela that said, how do you get paid? I try to steer folks toward a retainer so that I have at least a year to work with people, and I offer them some guaranteed services within a certain period of time for them to expect me to be able to provide within a certain, within the first month. I do research for them, and I am working with this checklist for success, and that may be one of our first tasks, is to go through the checklist for success and see what they have and what they don't have, and that's where we start. We start with some of our clients, they have none of this. I have actually had clients that have been around for a while, and they don't even know what a 501c3 is. They don't have a copy of it. And I actually have to do the research and, work with their Attorney General's office to get them a copy. And then we make sure we scan it, and it's electronic, and somebody has it. I have worked with agencies that have been around for a very long time, and they don't have the attachments in line for being able to register at grants.gov. And some of them have said, I had a client that was over 100 years old, and they didn't want to have a drug-free workplace policy. They didn't want to have an ADA policy, and I said, fine, we can't go after any state or federal grants if that's what you choose to do. And they go, oh. And just kind of knowing that information and getting them ready with this checklist for success helps them make some decisions about, what they want to do working with a consultant. With that retainer, I can not have to charge them for working on some of these things that they actually should have in place anyway, but most agencies need to work on their infrastructure. So it helps me to say, okay, we'll work on the checklist for success. I'll do an average of a proposal a month. I'll have a meeting with you at least once a month with your funding committee, and we'll be able to create a plan for you within the second month as to doing some research and being able to offer you this plan that is your targeted funders to be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to do in the next 12 months together. And that's how I work on getting paid, is that they have a flat fee and that they have some tasks in front of them that they know will help them not only with grants but also with fundraising, and to be able to have something very concrete that they can go back to their board and say, well, these are the kind of things we're working on. So this is the first page of the checklist for success. Here's the second page, and that includes things like, audits and letters of support and mission statements, bylaws, logic models, and certainly I updated this, of course, in 2009 when the new 990 form came out, which was a huge change in what nonprofits had to do. And I actually did some work with some agencies on helping them complete their new 990 form. So these are some of the things that I think are very basic. Many consultants say, I don't want to do this kind of work, and that's fine. And you've got to decide whether you want to or not work on these very basic infrastructure issues in your consulting or not. Because I have focused on this, think that it's pretty unique and that there aren't a lot of consultants doing it. And the reason why they say they aren't doing it is because folks don't want to pay for it. But if you bundle it with a retainer and you convince them how important it is to do these things before they start their grant seeking, before they start their fundraising, then it will certainly position them to be much more ready to be able to be successful. You'll see at the bottom of this that I actually wrote a journal article in the fall of 2008 about this particular checklist for success, and it was called Getting Your Organization Grant Ready, with a colleague of mine, Ritika Karup, who's also a chapter member in Miami Valley. And also with Steve, which I feel very honored, this checklist was part of our new book. Steve, do you want to say something about our new book?
You're giving me an opportunity to say something about a new book. You bet.
I am.
Sure. Charity Channel went into the publishing business about a year and a half ago, called Charity Channel Press, and our fourth title is about to come out, which Linda contributed to, called You and Your Nonprofit. And she actually contributed an article on this very subject. So we're very pleased to have had her join this effort, which involves somewhere around 40 colleagues working on this. It's going to be a massive book. It's over 500 pages, but it's written in a really down-to-earth, fun, upbeat kind of style, like you're talking to someone rather than reading something. So we're really proud of it. So we'll be announcing that probably at the late end of May, end of this month, or first part of June. And those of you who are hearing this in the recorded format, we're in the year 2011.
Oh, yeah, right. I forgot about
if you're hearing this in 2012, the book is out.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thanks,
Thank you
Steve.
for that. Sure.
I wonder, Carol and Pamela, about this checklist for success, if you would find this helpful, or do you often have to go back and do these kind of things with the nonprofits that you work with?
I usually have to do that. In fact, when I went to Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School, which has got about a $23 million budget, but it's just having these things all on the desk, on my desk, ready to go and pulling them out. And in other places, I've had to do this too. But my big question to you then is, if you're doing this on retainer, are you doing it on retainer and then charging per hour by the grant that you're doing, or how does it go? I'm hearing you say hourly rate and retainer, and that's where my big quandary is, I think.
Okay. In order to include the capacity building piece, what I have done that works with most folks is that I have in a retainer, I give them an hourly rate, then I give them a project fee, then I give them the retainer, which are similar, but with a retainer, the minimum hours of work that I will do with any nonprofit, any client, because I work with public agencies and for-profits also, any client is 20, okay, and that's only, you can do the math, only 5 hours a week. That's the minimum that I will do on a retainer. And in that retainer is my hourly rate, and that hourly rate in Ohio, what the market can bear, is anywhere from $75 to $100 an hour, okay? So you can do the math, depending on my market, and the bigger cities, of course, the market will bear the higher rates, and that also includes my travel time and anything else. I do not charge for additional expenses for any of my clients. My project fee and my retainer includes if I have to travel, to Columbus or Cincinnati or Cleveland or whatever. So that is very appealing for many folks. Whatever I produce, wherever I go, it's all in that retainer. So the retainer itself is a flat fee for 12 months. And when I first start, there's a learning curve. You put more hours in at the beginning with any new client. And that includes that capacity building, and then it includes those 3 guaranteed services, which includes that 1 monthly meeting, minimum of 1 monthly meeting, the research of the funders, and by the second month, being able to give them a plan with at least what funders they already have in mind, plus I guarantee at least 10 new funders, and we use that plan every meeting to go over the plan. We work the plan, and then the third deliverable is that I say that an average, that Butler Consulting will offer in the retainer over 12 months, an average of 10 proposals in a year. If they choose to do federal and state grants, that of course takes more time, then I tell them it's going to be less than 10. But as a rule, it takes the first couple of months to get the research done, to get the capacity building done, first quarter, usually to get the research, the capacity building done, and, this checklist for success, and then we're ready to go with proposals. So that's how I work it into the retainer, and that's much more appealing for most of my clients than an hourly rate. On an hourly rate, the consultant wins. We get paid a lot more on an hourly rate than a retainer. And with a project fee, you've got to be very conservative with your hours because it may take more time, than it usually does take more time than you actually bid. So you've got to be really careful about being specific about that project scope of service. With the retainer, it gives you the flexibility of doing what the client needs. And what I often find working with a client, what they really needed in that first meeting and what you find out in the first quarter is something differently or in addition to what the contract actually says, and the retainer gives you the flexibility to work that in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How big are most of the organizations you work with? I mean, what is their budget or number of staff or that kind of thing?
I've worked with zero money, zero staff, and I've worked with hundreds. This one place, over 1,000 employees that have been around, that has million dollar budgets. Butler Consulting has worked with over 160 clients over the last 17 years. So it's all over the place.
And is there a preference, do you think, like for the size of the organization, whether it's hourly or a retainer?
My preference has always been a retainer because it better meets the needs of the client. It gives you more flexibility to do what actually is the client needs, and often they don't know what they need. They, the one agency, for example, that had millions of dollars in their budget. They had lots of capacity building that I had to do. They were not grant ready, even though they had been around for a long, long time. So it allowed me to do that and get those ducks in a row and work on this checklist for success to help them be grant ready when they didn't think that they needed that.
Yeah. I appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any other suggestions or questions about the checklist? Okay, let's go on. The next is the business description, your focus, your services. And again, this was something that I was very specific about. And one of the ways I sort of, it's almost biblical, learn how to fish or teach the client how to fish. I have found that Butler Consulting, and we were very, we chose this, that included the capacity building. Often what we found with our competition, for example, is that a client would come to us and say, well, this consultant came in and they wrote the grant by themselves, didn't really involve us very much, and we didn't get it. And then they were gone, and they charged these high fees. And what we say instead, well, we have a different approach. What we want to do is teach you how to fish. We're not just going to go out there throwing the line all by ourselves in a vacuum for you and may or may not catch the fish. We're going to hold your hand and show you where the fish are and teach you how to bait the fish and actually catch a fish. And I actually put into my contracts that the history of Butler Consulting, and this is another way to steer folks toward the retainer, the history of Butler Consulting, and this is factual, is that if we work with a client for those 12 months, and 12 months, of course, helps you at least catch all the funders, because some funders are just once a year, and you also get to work with your client on capacity building, and or there may be fundraising that they're not doing. They may not even be doing anything with individuals, and that's where all the money is. It certainly isn't with grants, especially right now. The money's with individuals. So we are doing work with individuals also. I say historically that Butler Consulting will together as a team raise money historically, if you work with us for those 12 months, to pay the cost of our fee, no matter how big or how small that is. And the reality is that we work together for 12 months between grants, fundraising, the training, whatever. They're going to learn something new, and they're going to bring in enough money that equals the amount of money that they have paid for us. And historically, that has happened with our clients if we work with them for 12 months. So teaching them how to fish, it's hard to put that alone. It's hard to put a figure on that. But once they learn, and if they're quick studies or quick fisher people, they're getting it, and they're going out and they're working with their board and they're raising money with individuals or events or whatever, and they're happy campers. So that is a very different approach that we take versus most consultants that we're up against. That's very appealing to nonprofit folks, to the degree that we have actually mentored some of their staff and sort of teaching them the tricks of the trade and tips about grant seeking, fundraising, whatever, where it's made a big difference in a capital campaign, or it's made a big difference in the grants that they are bringing in versus what they had done before. So that is a very measurable result, a very measurable impact or outcome that Butler Consulting can show, and you can show that if you choose to focus on that as a unique thing that you do in your consulting. Another business description or product service, you need to define your business parameters. You may not want to have a thing to do with capacity building. You may not even want to work with grassroots organizations. They are high-maintenance folks. You may want a certain kind of client, and I think it was Pamela that was saying this. Maybe it was Carol. But you choose who your clients are, and if you have that luxury, you may want to say, hey, I only want to work with the organizations that have budgets of $500,000 or more, and that's fine. Go for it. If you have the ability to do that and write that into your business plan. We have chosen to keep it pretty wide open. And if there's, whatever business parameters you choose, work with what you want to do. You need to define what your strengths are, what your skill sets are, and certainly don't do something that you have no expertise in. That's where I bring in my associates. I know just enough about plan giving, for example, to be dangerous. If one of my clients wants plan giving, I am bringing in an associate who is good with that. I know what my limitations are as an individual, but if my client needs a certain thing as far as fundraising, I have wonderful resources, and I often partner with my competition in order to bring them in, because what goes around comes around. They'll be sending me referrals. So that kind of product service and that kind of focus, I think, is very important for you to be able to define who you want to be as a consultant. Don't try to be all things to all people. You may want to try to bundle things. And one bundling example that I have is that I happen to like training. I didn't know I did, but later on in my consulting, the last 5 years, for example, I have found a real need for training, especially giving continuing education units, and I happen to be licensed, so that what I have done is, with the experience I have with grant seeking and doing presentations, for national GPA or whatever, I have actually bundled that service so that my company, Butler Consulting, here in Ohio, is a pre-approved provider of social work counselor, marriage and family therapists, and nurses CEU training, continuing education units. So I literally have a service that's very strong with training that closely aligns with the grant seeking. And I have many, many agencies where I am doing continuing education presentations where they're paying me a fee. I'm giving out the continuing education certificate, and training is a beautiful, very strong way to market your consulting business. I, almost with every presentation, get at least 3 prospects, and usually at least one of those come through as a client. So I have found the training as a great service that complements beautifully the other services that we offer as a consulting firm. Location. Define where you want to serve, just like we have. What I found in the last couple of years is that because of the wonderful technology we have, it's pretty easy, if a client doesn't need to see you face-to-face, to work nationally. For example, I'm working with a particular firm out of New York, and they actually hire freelance consultants. And around federal grant time, there are great opportunities for them to send referrals. And I get referrals from them every year. I got a referral from New York. This was last month. The grant manager, the coordinator, was in Texas. I'm, of course, in Springfield, Ohio. My associate was in Cincinnati, and I have, associates all over the country. And my client was in Alaska. And so we literally did everything electronically. We used Skype, which is great to use with our client, and we never had to go on site in Alaska to meet the client. So it has broadened my ability to offer services. I prefer the one-to-one relationship with my client, but it doesn't have to be that way with all the wonderful tools we have. So I still say that our consulting firm primarily targets the Miami Valley of Ohio, but I am open, if clients are willing to work that way, to working with prospects or clients throughout the whole country. The next focus or service, you need to look at your communication options and skills, whether you want to do all that technical stuff or whether you want to do all face-to-face. And therefore limit, and whether you want to travel. Some consultants do a lot of traveling. You look at our dear friend, Dr. Bev Browning, she's on the road constantly. I mean, every day of the week, and she comes home for the weekend to kind of, rejuvenate and catch up with everything, and then she's on the road again. She, of course, is doing a new business right now, e-civics, which is great. But she very intentionally does a lot of work, especially training and grant writing throughout the whole country. So you need to decide that for yourself. Look at what credentials you have as an individual, and that helps you with your professional affiliations. I, of course, as a social worker, connect a lot with the clinicians, the social workers throughout the whole country, and especially here in Ohio. Look at certifications that agencies have. One of the services that we have created is working with agencies not only for fundraising, grant-seeking, consultation, training, but we now are doing certifications. If an agency needs to become COA accredited or CARF accredited or mental health accredited or whatever, getting all those policies and procedures in place, setting up a work plan to train people, that very closely aligns with the work that we do with nonprofits. And there's a market for that. So consider that, and that's part of the services that we, advertise on our website, that we can help a nonprofit with certifications or accreditations. And so that may sometimes lead into, a grant contract or fundraising contract or training contract or whatever. So look at those possibilities as to whether you want to do those or offer those yourself. Stories. I'm wondering if any of you have stories or examples as to those business descriptions and being able to focus, whether that's a struggle for you, focusing with what you want to do with your consulting, or whether you've just decided to do whatever comes your way. Wonder if you have any questions about that, Pamela or Carol?
Well, it's certainly the biggest challenge for me. This is Pamela here.
Okay.
Because you have your idea of what you want to do, and then you don't find a market for it, and you need to economically survive. So then I've been in nonprofits my whole life, so I do have a wide range of skill sets from, strategic planning to group facilitation, retreats. A lot of more than just grant writing. I'm also involved with marketing and communications in general. So it's like I'm right now in a position where I'm reacting more than creating intentionally out of myself, and I'd like to turn that around, which is why I'm listening to this. listening to you today.
Great.
Challenging.
Okay. These days you have to be creative. I'll tell you, it's not easy being a consultant, and there are certainly peaks and valleys in the work that we do, and that's very normal. So sort of struggling with what your services are going to be is healthy and can be pretty stressful, but I think it sort of moves us to being creative and looking beyond what we want to offer to meet the needs of nonprofits. And if it's not part of your skill set, may help you to look at maybe pulling in some 1099 folks or associates that have that expertise, if you can identify that need in your target area that you want to serve. Great. And Carol, did you have any comments? Is Carol muted again?
Sorry, I'm still on mute, right?
That's okay.
Sorry, I've been turning you off so I don't bug you. My problem is staying focused, and I really appreciated hearing, Pamela, saying that her skill set is so varied. For me, it's hard, I say, why write a grant, or why should I? The first steps are so important, whether it's redesigning their brochures, their pamphlets, or their websites, or just all other kinds of things that need to be going into it all. And I really, really appreciate hearing your idea about a retainer, because it's just so tough to work with them when, before you even go into writing a grant, you need to do all the homework. Even if they've got their budget and they've got the 501c3 and all that, just understanding what they need to do in order to start raising money.
Good point. I agree. And the focus is I think a struggle for any consultant. That's why I think it's so important I rewrite. I've rewritten my proposals for clients many, many times just to make sure I am articulating, at least in writing, what it is that we're going to do together. And sometimes even that isn't necessarily what we end up doing, because the client wants to be more flexible. And if it's within the scope of what we're willing to do based on the hours that we've bid on, it works out. It can work out. And sometimes we have to be flexible as far as changing the focus with our client, because what they think they need and what they actually need are two different things. So the focus, I think, is a challenge, and also making sure that the client we're meeting their expectations. That's another piece that I try to do with my clients at quite frankly, every meeting, getting an assessment, an evaluation. Are you pleased with what we accomplished in this meeting today? Do you need anything else from me? Are there other things I can do to help move this along? What do you want me to do differently? It's always, especially as a consultant, I think we need to ask for that kind of feedback from our clients to make sure that they're happy campers, because they sometimes don't volunteer that information, and then all of a sudden it's like they've terminated our contract, and it's like, what happened? Or I thought we were doing quite well, and they don't necessarily, as a consultant, have to give you that feedback. But I do ask for that, and especially on a quarterly basis when I'm working on a retainer. I sit down very, very, very planfully with the exec or whomever, signed on the dotted line and said, okay, this is where we are after X number of months. Are you happy? Do you want me to do anything differently? And really kind of drill pretty deep as to if the direction we're going is what they want. And in that way, I've been able to have some continuation contracts or spin off and do some other work that they want us to do instead, because what we identify, they've assigned it to another staff member versus the consultant, and just that focus, I think, will help if we actually get some pretty direct feedback from our customers, from our clients. And so that's something I build in as sort of a feedback tool with whomever I'm working with. Does that make sense?
Yes, I really like this. I'm really happy. I had a contract with a group to raise $300,000, and it was just getting so frustrating. This was supposed to be over 3 years, and we did it in 1 year, which was just extraordinary. And they can't understand now why I need a new contract in order to go. And just hearing the dollar amount that you charge for a retainer is really exciting for me. So,
well, good.
And you're right, it's getting spread really thin, and you've got to find out if there's other people who can be doing different things.
Right.
With the organization.
Right. Yeah. We can't do it all. We can't be all things to all people. And giving yourself permission to, what we provide as consultants, these are valuable services. These are very unique services. And one of the things I found when I did this at St. Pete, it was amazing to me. I had to give people permission to set limits and not be consumed by their client and doing everything their client said just to keep the client. And also permission to charge a decent fee, not doing things for free. I don't believe in doing free consulting, and some people don't like to hear that, and that's okay. They can do whatever they want. They say, well, I got to get started with somebody, so I'm going to do this pro bono. I'm going to do it for free. I cringe when I hear that. What we do is valuable. We have great expertise. It's a cost-effective way to accomplish a very important task in organizations, and don't sell yourself short as to what you have to offer. And I had people lined up out the door saying, I'm not charging enough, or I'm not being creative enough, or I'm working too hard, or whatever. And it's like, revisiting, why did you get into consulting to begin with? So you could have some freedom, so you could have some control and some balance in your life. Not that you wanted to work, 80 hours a week. I don't work 80 hours a week, and I have no intention of doing that. If I get a lot of business and a lot of work, I bring in associates. And I feel very blessed that I have very strong people that have a lot of expertise, and I ask for help. I don't try to do it all myself. And there are, lots of times where I am doing it all by myself because there's not as much business, and you just have to determine that yourself. But we offer some very valuable expertise, and we need to give ourselves credit for that, and be able to say to a nonprofit, this is unique, and it's hard to find. So sometimes we don't value ourselves enough to be able to get out there and market ourselves or offer something that is very important. It's a real asset to an agency. So, good. Thanks for your feedback. That's very helpful to me. Let's move on to the next slide, which is about prospects. And I think I shared a little bit about this because some folks will say, well, how do you get started? Where do you find these people? And how do you actually close a deal or whatever. I did give you the example about I do try to, give one free consultation, and that's what I call my, assessment meeting. One of the other things I do, quite frankly, is I'm often asked as a small business to donate to a nonprofit. Like the Symphony called me yesterday, and they said, oh, you gave your one free hour of consultation and a meal away last year to the Symphony. Will you do that again? I said, well, yeah, sure. It's a freebie that is wonderful marketing for me, and I have probably 5 or 6 of those that I do every year for the nonprofits around here. Even if no one bids on the item, I've got my name in front of all these people that come to this particular auction or event or whatever, and they know that I'm local. And so it's a way to get my name out there. And it's a win-win for me because I normally do one freebie anyway as far as how I work with my prospects. And I'm able to do a lunch, breakfast, dinner I'm a member of lots of different groups. I find networking is the best way to get prospects. I'm a member of GPA. I'm a member of AFP. I'm a member of my local social work association. I'm very active in my church. I'm running a support group in my church, free, support group. I've got business from there. I'm a member of the Planned Giving Council here in town. So I have a tendency to do a lot of networking with service clubs or whatever aligns with your expertise or your your background. I try to go to those kind of meetings. And then I also create the very targeted proposals, as I shared with you before, that's very specific to that particular client or prospect. I'll volunteer to go to a board meeting once I've submitted a proposal or a committee meeting, whatever works for that organization, and explain any kind of questions they have, and that's a great chance, even if you don't get the contract, it's a great chance to be in front of, 10, 15 people that might be on other boards. So I see that as just part of my marketing, and also hopefully a way to have some closure on a contract. One of the things I do is I reach out to other folks. If I run across a funding opportunity that I'm not going to use with my clients or other folks, then I send it out to other consultants or other folks in the community that I've worked with. And I often that has come back and become business for me, because I'm not working with a school, for example, right now. So I send school funding opportunities to the school contacts that I have, and I've worked with the schools that way. They remember me. They remember the free service I gave them, and it's a win-win. So however you can network, or however that works with you, do it. Do it. I just see that as part of my marketing plan. And then on a monthly basis, minimally on a quarterly basis, those prospects that are out there that kind of I haven't heard from or I've planted some seeds, I do some kind of follow-up. Be that an email, a grant opportunity, a call, a meeting, whatever, so that I can perhaps answer any questions they have from whatever past contacts we've had, so we can have some closure. Okay, marketing strategies. I've gone over some of these. Defining your target market, that's certainly up to you. Knowing your competition. I do know locally, and pretty much in the Miami Valley area, who some of the folks are that I come up against when, people are looking at other consultants. So I try to stay within the range of whatever their hourly rate is, or however they're packaging their services. And therefore, I've looked at my pricing strategies, and I've listed again those three options. And then I did mention to you about the paychecks and packaging your services. Whatever works for you, or bringing in associates as to defining that scope of services, knowing your market, working on relationships, and doing a lot of networking. Creative marketing, I pretty much from the get-go did have a website. It's very basic. It's not fancy. I'm getting ready to update my website. I use PayPal, for example, with my training, so people can pay online. My networking, you'll see some of the groups right there that I mentioned that I go to on a regular basis and get involved. Advertising, I don't advertise in the phone book. I don't think that's my target audience. It's too general. But I do sponsorships. I do door prices with folks at events, so my name gets out there. And I've, certainly the training has paid off for me. It's a great marketing tool. Just for your information, one of the other pieces that I am able to market is, I don't know whether either of you know about compression planning and storyboarding, but for grants in particular, and there's the website, it was an incredible 3-day experience that I had in Pittsburgh. And now they have an institute in Dayton, Ohio, with, quite frankly, the grant gurus of the whole country that use compression planning and storyboarding at Sinclair Community College. That is a wonderful training, and compression planning storyboarding is a great tool that I use with project development. So you may want to look into that further as you market who you are or want to strengthen some of the skills that you have. The management and administration, as well as ethical and financial issues. What I've listed here are probably some things that you're all doing. Looking at whether you want to have a lot of employees or associates, whether you want to partner with other consulting firms that I do a lot of. Often I know of another firm that might be bidding on a particular contract, so I just call them. I contact them, have a meeting with them at their place and see if instead of competing against each other, let's work together. Let's both go together on the contract and shut everybody else out. That's been very successful for me with some of the consulting firms that around here that I've worked with. And doing SWOTs. I'm sure you both are doing SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats. Very basic tool to use with any kind of, when you need a focus, as you mentioned before, with an organization. It's a great tool to use to help them with any kind of capacity building or being able to very quickly with a board or a staff or whatever group of people you're working with, depending on your topic, to use that particular tool to get some focus and to get some direction on whatever it is they want you to offer as far as consulting services. I'm very, very cognizant of ethics and values, especially as a fundraiser, and often quoting those, as I said. I quote this particular ethic that, members shall not be paid, seek, or accept finder's fees, et cetera, et cetera. That's that whole issue of contingencies as a grant professional, and that happens to be AFP. It's very close to GPA, and it's very close to the ethics for a social worker. Strategic planning is something that we also offer, and it can be worked with a board or a staff, so that's another tool. I think one of you did mention that that's what you also do, and it's another service you certainly can provide when you work with nonprofits. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple of do's and don'ts before we end up. We're getting sort of near the end of our 90 minutes together, and I want to leave some time for any questions or comments you have at the end. But whoops, I think I went too far, didn't I? Let's go back to the first one. Do I have these opposite? Let me see what I have here. Yeah, I do. I have those slides backwards. Okay, the 10 consulting do's and don'ts. I think these are important as you bump into other consultants and sort of as kind of an ethical way to approach the work that we do as consultants. I am very careful, even if I happen to agree to disagree about how another consultant has worked with a client or how they do their business. I don't say that in front of another client or consultant. And some of these are just, you just kind of say, well, yeah, but I have heard other consultants do that. And I think that it's important for us to have those kind of values that we don't ridicule another consultant's work. I don't make deals that I'm not authorized to make. If I'm in a meeting and I'm wearing the hat of my client because they don't happen to be there and they wanted me to attend a meeting and speak for them, I have to be careful as to whether I can, actually make certain statements or not. I don't take shortcuts. That will come back and bite you. I don't bill for time spent socializing. I'm very careful about, if I pull the executive director aside and ask for some feedback, whether I bill for that or not. Number 5, act like employees are in your way. Employees are your clients. We've got work that we need to get done, but we have to somehow find ways to work with those employees so that they have ownership of the project that we're working on together. And that's, for me, part of the joy of working in an organization, because every organization is different. and be able to build those relationships so that those employees are able to integrate the advice or information that you're sharing with them so that they can make it happen. Number 6, don't flirt. Number 7, don't engage in political or religious discussions. That will come back and bite you, no matter what side of the issue you're on. Number 8, and I'm kind of going backwards here, I don't leave without explaining what I've done, making sure that you are clear with the client what happened in a particular meeting, or letting the exec, if they weren't in a meeting, letting them know that what decisions were made or recommendations. You don't fail to document. I'm very assertive about volunteering to take the minutes, so that I sort of have control over what happens as far as documenting what actually took place in a meeting. And number 10, refuse to listen to employees' needs. I often get pulled aside where I get very valuable information about what's happening in an organization by a very concerned employee. May be very, very helpful to getting it right and getting some good information, being professional at all times, and treating our clients with respect. Okay, let's move on to the end here, and then we'll ask for some questions. There are lots of freedoms, but there are also a lot of challenges and realities in this world of consulting, and you've just got to figure out what works for you. What works for me isn't going to necessarily work for you. I hope that what we've shared over the last couple minutes gave you some tips and ideas and maybe some refocus or some avenues to pursue. We're all in this together. We're not competing with each other when you get right down to it. And I'm glad to share this information and hope that you do the same with others. I see GPA consultants as models. I happen to be listed on the consultant listing for GPA, and there are lots of places in your community where that can happen for you. The Grants Information Centers at your libraries, there's a great consultant list there, and other places where you can, be listed as a consultant. One of our skills, of course, and I give this credit to our dear friend Pauline Anarino, this is one of the skills and competencies of the GPA GIPSY credentialing. And what we've been really talking about today is knowledge of organizational development as it pertains to grant seeking. And that is one of those skills that's very important to be a good consultant. So I wish you success with your consulting. We want to stop here for the next couple minutes and see if you have any questions or comments. Carol or Pamela?
This is Carol. I would love it if you could, by any chance, send me some of your sample contracts, both for hourly and retainer and whatever else you do.
Okay.
That would be really, really helpful to me.
Okay. Well, for offline, if you'd send me an email, so I'll have your email, and you've got my email at the beginning of the proposal. If you'll just send me a request for that, then I'll have your email, and I'll be glad to share that with you.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Pamela, anything that I can help with, or any closing comments?
Well, Linda, this is very helpful. You touched base on lots of really important things, and I'm really happy I listened to the seminar today. I would like to just take you up on following up with an email and maybe making an appointment to meet at some point.
Okay, that'd be fabulous. And if you'll please send me an email, we'll make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Wonderful. Well, I do wish you success. I've left you with some slides here, websites and mentoring that we have available, getting involved in your local GPA chapters, maybe even doing a webinar like this, and be sure to take care of yourself as a consultant. Make sure you renew and energize and network and have fun at what you're doing, because there's a lot of freedom in the work that we do, and I wish you all success. And be sure to target, and let's keep in touch. Steve, do you have any closing comments at all?
Well, there was a lot of wisdom there. I've been consulting for over 30 years myself, and although some of it's law practice, and I think we lawyers have an easier go of it in many ways, there seems to be an unending demand for our services.
True.
Unfortunately, or however you want to view that. But, I wanted to mention a few resources as well. GPA is, I was nodding, you can't see me. I'm a huge fan of GPA, and I also have a GPC designation after my name, so I was nodding during that discussion. And in addition, there is if you're a Charity Channel member, you can have a free listing in the Consultants Registry. So that's something to consider. A lot of nonprofits consult with that one as well as with the GPA one, although they're going to probably go to the GPA site if they're looking for a grant consultant per se. That's a more pure list of grant consultants, but yeah, a lot of consultants in our Charity Channel registry. The second thing is we just rolled out a new version of Charity Channel, and you can join a Charity Channel group now. And one has either started up or is about to start up for nonprofit consultants to discuss among themselves the challenges of consulting for nonprofit clients. And that actually has a very long tradition with Charity Channel. There was a discussion list called Consultants that goes back, I think it goes back 19 years on Charity Channel. And so it's now morphing into a Charity Channel group, which has a forum, a document exchange system, and all kinds of other sharing tools. So that's something to consider. And then, those are the main things. I just wanted to kind of work those in. Thanks for asking. I don't want to take any more time up now, but appreciated that. And I want to thank you, Linda, for teaching this and many other sessions that you've done in the past for Grant Professionals Association and Charity Channel and anybody else who wants to listen in and take these sessions. They've been really, really helpful. It's a lot of prep to do these, so thank you for that. And for those of you who are taking this session either live or in recorded version, you're advancing your career by doing this, so I applaud you for that. That's you're somebody I would want to work with just because you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so there we are. Well, I wish everybody a wonderful afternoon.